My name is Haki Shabazz. I represent Black Students for Revolution, BSFR, on the U of I campus. BSFR actually started before I even came on the campus. So it was started by some individuals who are still members of BSFR. So I can speak in terms of when I got involved and where I can see in terms of how BSFR has grown. So I believe it started in 2012, if I'm not mistaken. It was either 2012 or 2014, if I'm not mistaken. I got involved again in 2016 when I came on the campus, and one of the first organizations I actually joined was Black United Front. So Black United Front, many other organizers who are part of BSFR are part of Black United Front. Black United Front wanted to be a coalition of Black students and Black organizations that can call on to the university for, to have a political voice, a broad spectrum. So I got involved with Black United Front, and then from Black United Front I got involved with Black Students for Revolution. I was official member of Black Students for Revolution going into my sophomore year of college. Our mission, again, I think our mission is just like any other organization or a group that considers themselves, progressive, radical even at the moment, maybe revolutionary, Marxist ideals, internationalists, acknowledging all intersections and understanding that because oppression is connected, we have to connect with people who are against, all forms of oppression. So we don't take, we're anti-heteronormativity, anti-capitalist, so anti-Islamophobia. As a Muslim, as myself, obviously I wouldn't be a part of an organization that would accept me. But again, I could say the same thing about multiple organizations. I believe BSFR has the same mission, the same goal. In terms of the U of I campus, our focus is to ensure that Black students feel comfortable at the campus, that they're actually able to progress on the campus. One of the things that we passed, we've been trying to work on again, is Project 1000. So Project 1000 actually comes from Project 500, which was back in the 60s, 1968. One of the biggest protests in college campus history and one of the biggest arrests in college campus history. Black students were asking for 600 students every single year that come in. University administration was like, okay, bet, we'll give you one better, we'll accept 500. Since the 60s till now, we've only seen 500. And the population for Black students has not changed at all. If not, it has decreased based on the fact that U of I is trying to increase their numbers. If I'm not mistaken, they tried to increase their numbers by 20,000 in the next couple years. So a little tangent, but it might speak to why they're building all these apartment complexes, gentrifying the city, but that's a different conversation. But again, our demand was, Project 1000, 1,000 Black students coming in. Even though we should be having way more Black students coming in, we were just asking for 1,000. We also asked for more money as well to help fund the institutions on campus, to create more institutions on campus for Black students. So that's all a part of Project 1000. But again, as BSFR, I've organized with so many other students on so many radical organizations on the campus of the university. Coronavirus done messed up a lot of people. So in terms of members of BSFR down here, it's not that many. A lot of them have gone, back to Chicago due to the coronavirus. So I think it's, I don't say I think, it's me and another member who's down here who's been involved with the organizing. Obviously, we tell BSFR exactly what's going on. So I would say most of BSFR's actions down here in Champaign are part of the CCR, part of the Champaign County Anti-Racist Coalition. But again, one of the issues that came up again was the noose incident back in 2019, the first weekend when the semester started, when my senior year started. And so recently, maybe 3 weeks ago, they said that the person had to pay, $70, $75, and that they're good. And so we wanted to make a statement regarding that and make statements regarding, sexual assault, basically make statements again regarding what's going on now. But again, coronavirus has messed up so much stuff, is that, although I am here, and another member of BSFR is here, as a group, we're still working together to get things done. But again, we're kind of, I don't want to say we're scattered, but again, revolution comes up in multiple spots. We have people who were in Chicago during the protest during George Floyd, right after George Floyd. So, and I wasn't there, I was down here. So, we're doing the action. I think CCARC and everything that's going on, we're starting to lay the foundation where BSFR is not just BSFR and U of I, but BSFR is a part of something bigger, not even just on the campus of U of I, but a part of the whole county of Champaign. So I think that BSFR specifically, again, still pushing Project 1000, pushing the tuition, fighting tuition rates, especially during coronavirus, and there are ideas that, not I don't want to say rumors, but ideas that they're going to bring everyone back on campus. Going to have to end up switching straight back to online, give it like what, 3-4 weeks, and then because you already brought people back online, you can use the idea in terms of, well, we brought everyone here. We don't have the money to refund the students. So that's a fight that not only BSFR is a part of, but many other student organizations on campus are a part of and fighting. So again, Project 1000. The tuition, that being an issue, and money and funding, U of I, obviously working against sexual assault, that's been our #1 thing. And there's an organization that has, Black women have created an organization here in Urbana called HER, Healing Every Revolutionary. And that is, to specifically shine a light on Black women and Black queer women, Black trans men and women. So their focus, maybe, in terms of some of the demands that they're pushing, may lead into, fighting sexual assault and fighting certain things that other organizations have been maybe fighting. But again, if they can get it done, we're gonna all, by any means, gonna work with them. So what BSFR wants is what many other organizations want. And I think just to keep it as simple as that, in terms of, like, again, the specific specific programs or projects, I would say Project 1000, and again, working with other organizations to fight against the tuition hardships and refund and the money situation at U of I. A great professor at U of I, Dr. Sundiata Chajua, Afro professor in the Afro department, he said every revolutionary has a toolkit. So obviously the first tool in the kit would be, peaceful demonstration. Obviously the last thing would be, violence, as we've seen in terms of, revolutions across the world and throughout human history. Obviously violence ends up being the case. Now, I'm not saying that that's what we're jumping to, no. So within that toolkit, you start to progressively, get toward the other side, toward the other end. So again, peaceful demonstration is the first one, and I believe that peaceful demonstration, even though we've had the looting, across the states, that set a message, and that message has created a lot of the changes that we see. And revolution is spontaneous. So when stuff comes up, depending on how angry people respond, will determine what's going to happen. But in the case of Champaign, we've had multiple demonstrations and marches. There are some people that will say, that's not going to get anything done. That does nothing. It goes beyond that. What I will say is protesting is the reason why CCR came into existence. Protesting is when coalitions are created, because we can meet like-minded individuals, we can meet like-minded organizations who are willing to sit down and create a foundation of a coalition or an organization, program, anything that we're looking for that can push, the society forward. So, I'm always down for a little protest. I'm always down for a demonstration. I have great time, and I'm also, meeting new faces, meeting new people, So the best thing about demonstrations would be that, you get to meet like-minded people, but again, you also are saying and spreading a message. And one thing that we've noticed is that once the looting stopped, the news stopped, but the protests and marches have not stopped. And it speaks to, Gil Scott-Heron talking about, the revolution will not be televised. Not only is he talking about the physical revolution, but he's really talking about the mental revolution. And as you see, they're not gonna, post as much about the continued protests across, the globe even, that are have been mainly peaceful. But again, I think that is just to keep the momentum. So that's another thing that demonstration does. Meet like-minded people, keep pressure, and also, to keep the momentum going. To let people know that we're not done, that although we're going to create coalitions, we're going to create organizations to actually, sit down and create some demands. The momentum has to be there, especially because we know for a fact that it really depends on what's going to happen to those officers if they're convicted or not. Yes, you may be charged and arrested. It really depends on what's going to happen to those officers if they're convicted or not. Yes, you may be charged and arrested, but if they're convicted or not, where do we go from there? So I think this is the building momentum, to keep that momentum going, to ensure that when this, to let the powers that be hear us and let us know that we still have not forgotten about Breonna Taylor. We still have not forgotten about George Floyd. We still have not forgotten about all the black men and women, the black trans men and women that are killed in this country, not only by police, but by, racism in itself, but also just from patriarchy and misogyny in general. But specifically to the Breonna Taylor and George Floyd case, obviously we still want to keep the pressure to ensure that those officers are arrested and charged. Not just fired, but charged and arrested. And we also want to ensure that the new law that they passed, which is funny, the irony that you pass a law in her name to stop no-knock warrants, but you don't arrest and convict the officers that are basically the reason for the creation or the passing of this legislation. So again, just to keep the momentum that, we're not done, we're not silent. Because the powers that be are gonna probably go like, it's gonna die down in a little bit, but we have to keep the revolution going. Revolution is continuous. We may have progression, we may go back a few steps, but again, revolution is always gonna have its highs and lows. We're probably at like a nice little medium point. But in terms of Champaign, again, like I said, I'm always down for demonstrations. I'm always down to say our voice, to speak our voice, to show up, especially because every single demonstration seems to be something different. One of the demonstrations that I ran across, was HVNT, another organization down here in Champaign, and I met them probably that Sunday. Then the next day on Monday they had, or maybe it wasn't the next day, but I met them and they had to protest. And then, black women students at U of I were like, oh, let's keep going. I want to keep going. I was like, shoot, I'm down the ride. But if you guys are, let's go. And so that's that Monday protest. And that was probably the biggest protest that Champaign has ever seen. But then I got in touch with, Justin, and got in touch with Pain and Peace. And then I hate to use the word, but they even trumped the protest that we had on Monday that following Saturday and created even more history in Champaign. So, who would have thought Champaign, Urbana, in terms of how big, the movement for, revolution, the movement for, radical change is here in Champaign. And so, just to keep that momentum going. And I think we're getting now to the point where we are listening in on, their demonstrations every Monday and Wednesday regarding council meetings, Tuesdays regarding council meetings. So it's not only demonstrations, but it's also educational opportunities, because we have people that may see the flyer, they come out, but then we put the phone up to, let's say, the megaphone, and we're hearing the council meeting go on. And so now we're getting the updates. Like, we got the update. We were there when we found out that Seraphim was reinstated. And so from Seraphim being reinstated, we marched in front of some council members, some county members' houses around the corner. And so, we're even regardless of how small they may seem, it's big that we're making noise and that we're seeing the faces of those in power. We're seeing who's in power. We know that elections are coming up November and March for the county in November, and then for Urbana Council and their mayor in March. We're seeing what needs to happen, especially even if it's short term. Well, not short term, but it's coming up quickly. We see what needs to happen. The fact that in the council meeting, they said, the majority of people do not want Seraphim reinstated, but we're going to reinstate Seraphim anyway. It just shows how the powers that be, the people that we elected to a degree, don't even listen to its people. So that means it is up to us. It's showing the contradictions of white supremacy. It's showing the contradictions of American democracy. And when we see those contradictions, we see what we must do. And after that reinstatement, I think that is specifically when members who have CCARC now were like, we should get a coalition going. And so again, those demonstrations, those meeting of people, that's when the real revolutionary groundwork comes. And I remember seeing a quote, I don't remember who it was, but it was, a real revolutionary does not plan for the revolution, they plan for after when it's done. It's what are you building when everything changes swiftly? There has to be something there, right? So revolution is a building process, and I think it speaks specifically to the condition of the Black liberation movement, the LGBT liberation movement, the feminist movement, and even going back to the countercultural, the Asian liberation movement, the movement against ICE raids, the movements for, immigrants. I think it speaks to our condition specifically here in America, because America is the mother country of world capitalism, of white world supremacy. So I think our condition is very, I don't want to say extraordinary. I would say our condition is extraordinary in the fact that we're fighting the system at home in the system itself. So I think the building process, the demonstrations and what happens after that is key. It's important because we need something to build upon here in this mother country. What we're not going to see, unfortunately, during the 70s, when the world was waking up through nationalism, and they were creating their countries, their societies. The Black liberation movement here in America, obviously we didn't create our own society, right? But the consciousness of the people was waking up. And so progression was made, but obviously we see that there's still things that need to be done. So until we reach the ultimate revolution where it's just, America's gone no more, right? Which I believe is harder for us than across the board, because again, we're here in the mother country. This is the home state. That's why policing and the military industrial complex gets so much money and funding, because it's supposed to protect capital. It's supposed to protect the elites, and their power. And we're seeing now with the defunding of the police, the dismantling of the police, you're seeing that the people trying to take power away from the powers that be. In my opinion, it's becoming more, I don't know if I want to say truer than ever. It's becoming more something that's real than ever before, So again, that's a long-winded answer to the question. But again, back to the question in terms of, the demonstrations, we will definitely see a lot more demonstrations. The Black women here, they're having their demonstration, tonight at 5:30. There will always be demonstrations. And again, those demonstrations are, again, to just push the coalition forward, to push, radical organizations forward in terms of meeting, what are your demands that can fit under our demands? What are our demands that can fit under your demands? Where can we see the solidarity that's going to push all of our, agendas forward? Obviously, I believe we are about abolition, but we also understand that, again, the building process. When it comes to the defunding of the police, we're not just asking that you defund the police, we're basically asking that the money and the power that goes to police is switched and is changed and given to the people. So I take it, and my theory is that I take it on like a balance scale. And so if you look at a balance scale, right now it's in the hands of the power. And so as you defund the police and you start moving it to the other side, people start getting that power. Now, when the people get more power, you may see the complete abolition of the military industrial complex, the prison industrial complex, even the medical industrial complex, which basically treats healthcare as, a commodity, but not a right, a human right. So once you start seeing that transfer of balance, that transfer of power on the balance scale, that's when I think you will see the ultimate end, which is complete abolition of, these structures that maintain capitalism, that maintain racism, that maintain white supremacy. So I don't believe that defunding police and abolition are two different things. I think defunding the police leads to abolition. because again, and I think a lot of people are so stuck in this idea of, what do we do without police? But policing was fairly new throughout human history. It's really fairly new. It came from the slave patrols. So not only is it, the material change in terms of defunding the police, but it's also changing the mindsets and the consciousness of people into to dream and think, believe in a society without police, believe in a society when even to the degree where there's no idea of money. I'm down to the point where obviously money is fake. We've created this thing to place value onto something, and as a Marxist myself, I think that's why I love Marxism so much, is because it gets to the idea, it moves away from this idea of material. If we look at what we see, they're building apartments left and right, and most of those places are empty. Why can't we feed? Why can't we give housing to the homeless? Why can't we feed people? We see it when you look across, in other nations, across the continents, across the world. A lot of the food that we eat comes from there. But it's one thing about food sovereignty. Are the people that are producing the food, in Africa, in South America, in Southeast Asia, are the people that are producing the food so that Americans can eat it, are they even able to, bear the fruit which they, produce? So, we have to ensure food sovereignty that, across the globe, where people who are producing food, they are able to get their food. Water sovereignty, most of the conflicts in the world are due to water. So let's look at Egypt and Ethiopia, actually perfect. Let's look at America. The Colorado River runs south. And so if we're just dumping all of our toxins and waste into the river, once the river gets to Mexico, most of the water is not clean, right? So then you have conflict over that. So I know that goes away from, the abolishing and defunding of the police, that question, but in terms of looking at money, in terms of looking at, what gives power. When we move because money shows all the contradictions, how is it that Jeff Bezos has hundreds of billions of dollars? He can, quote unquote, cure world hunger and still be the richest man in the world, right? So this idea of money. And I think it piggybacks onto this idea of policing. I think, the consciousness of the people in terms of believing in a society that doesn't need police. I'm down to the point where I want people to believe in a society where there's no need, where there's no idea of money. If you work, you're gonna get housing, you're gonna get food, you're gonna get clothing, you're gonna get, the basics, and even to the point where you can even get some luxuries. I believe everybody can have some luxuries at some point. Again, we have to move from this idea of money. That's a long shot though, but in terms of policing, I believe that's here. We can see it now. The idea that policing is something so obsolete, Angela Davis, prisons are obsolete. Once people start to question, instead of thinking what is the alternative to policing, think of what is the alternative to just this whole society. What can we see differently? So defunding the police leads to abolishing the police. And again, it's that building process, so that when we can finally get rid of the police, we have, the community health centers, we have the mental health professionals, we have the counseling, we have, the structures and the resources in place to take care of a lot of the problems that they give to police anyway. They treat police, to basically control a whole bunch of social, issues, housing. They call police for that. They call police for mental health issues. They call police for domestic issues, domestic violence, which could, in that case, we have counseling. We have certain programs that can, let's say if it's a domestic issue between, a man and a woman, a program that can take them apart, and understand, get to the key reasons why they're domestic issues. And a lot of times those domestic issues are because because somebody's dependent on the other. And see, when we have this idea of dependency, that the idea of dependency comes from capitalism, who's the breadwinner of the household. But you can even get down to the T where it's, now you're questioning the social constructs of masculinity and femininity, the idea that the man needs to control the house. But in reality, if you look at, black men and brown men, how they're not able to participate in capitalism the same way that other men are, that may hurt their masculinity. And nowhere am I saying or letting it slide. I'm saying there's a reason behind a lot of the toxic masculinity, the violence against women, especially, the violence against black women. In my opinion, I feel it is, these social constructs of masculinity and femininity. So then we're down to the point where we want to remove those constructs. In order to remove those constructs, it needs education. So where's our money for education going to come from? Defunding the police, the complete abolition of the police. Where's it going to come from in counseling? Defunding the police. So everything that we want to see comes from the power going away from the police, the police and the military that protect capital, that protect the elites. Once we see that, we can see the change that we wish to see. We can see the starting to get down to the nitty gritty. I'm not saying that what I'm talking about in terms of, masculinity and femininity, in terms of that being an issue where, that can affect black men and women. I'm not saying that's necessarily the nitty gritty, but when you get to the point where you start questioning, masculinity, how that plays a role into the relationships between black men and women, and how on a larger scale there is unfortunately, not enough respect for black women. There's not enough, love for black women from black men's perspective, from a black man's point. People could say it's nitty gritty when I say masculinity and femininity, but again, masculinity and femininity, those were created because of capitalism to further divide people. So again, in terms of, what are the ideas of masculinity? Sexual dominance, sexual aggression, hegemonic masculinity, have to provide. So if you're looking at black men who are not able to participate in that hegemonic masculinity, they're gonna look for that hegemonic masculinity in other forms. And unfortunately, those other forms may be, the sexual aggression, the sexual dominance, or the disrespect of women, because that's what white patriarchal racism has been. White man here, white woman here, but you feel me? So to go back to the question, I'm saying that in terms of, to think and believe in a society that's totally different than what we know now. The society without money. But because we have money now, it comes from defunding the police, which is going to obviously lead to the abolition of the police. But when we see the abolition of the police and the abolition of the military-industrial complex, you're looking at, it's literally just the powers that be and the people. And I think that's when the real revolution comes. That's why defunding the police is so important. Because then once we rebuild, once we're building off the defunding of the police, and once the police are abolished, now we have a society and an idea of what we want. Now it is just to get rid of the powers that be, take all that power, and then we already have a society in place where that money and that power can be given to the people, and the people can thrive. So programs, well, not one of the programs, one of the actions that we were part of, was that BSFR was a part of, was bringing awareness to the Fifth and Hill community. So the Fifth and Hill community has been dealing with environmental racism for, 2 decades, even more now. And, working with, CCHCC, I always butchers is Champaign County Health Care Coalition, something like that. The Champaign Healthcare Consumers, that's it, Healthcare Consumers, my fault. Champaign County Healthcare Consumers. So, we have members working with them, working with the Fifth and Hill community. One of the main things about BSFR has always been outreach to the Champaign community. As students, we are privileged. We are a part of, I guess the top 20 public institution, but obviously universities are institutions of capitalism, right? Why do they put so much money toward engineering, which can probably go into creating weapons of destruction, so weapons of surveillance, technology that actually suppresses revolution, instead of putting money into like the liberal arts, which is actually the thinking, how human society is supposed to really move and perform. just a quick thing, you know, a lot of people think that because technology advances, humanity advances, and that's definitely not the case. Obviously, nowhere was Barack Obama great, never. But I'm sure we can all agree that Barack Obama at least has some more intelligence than Donald Trump. You know, Donald Trump is just the, you know, you're talking about the evil, the nasty of the nasty. So even in just these 12 years that we have seen, you see how, you know, people are getting uglier, right? And you're seeing, you know, white racism at the individual level come back in, you know, in strength and numbers. You know, maybe it was always there. It's being seen now more though. So I guess that plays a role. But you know, human progression is ups and downs, but technology keeps going up. And it's crazy because as technology keeps going and then industry keeps going, climate change keeps happening as well. See how those are related. But the reason why I say that is, you know, one thing I was telling some of the members, I said, you know, I'm getting us plugged down here. You know, I'm getting us in terms of, you know, connections with organizations who are across all the Champaign, Urbana area. So if we are able to work with the Fifth and Hill community and what we were able to do there, you know, to put pressure on the Illinois EPA to have for Ameren to no longer have you know, the further remediation zone, no further remediation letter, we put pressure like, no, you still have to clean up, right? Raising money to get these devices in the houses of individuals in the Fifth and Hill community. You know, something as, even though it's a big issue, something as little as the Fifth and Hill community though, the fact that we're able to join with a coalition that is off and on campus, you're looking at areas where we're supporting certain areas maybe, let's say, we may not have known of. We may not have the resources to reach, but there are other organizations that can reach it. There are other organizations that have the power that have been in these other areas where we can lend, you know, our work, our resources, the work that we want to do. And I think that is the key, again, to coalition building. We see that there are problems everywhere. You know, it's how can we get to them? You know, BSFR is one organization, you know, a small organization on campus. We're not even out off campus where we can really get in touch with the community. Well, we can still get in touch with the community, but I say that this is a better outreach, better outreach. And, you know, that outreach, you know, includes, you know, if we got something on U of I going on, CCARC is, we know the community will be involved too, especially because U of I is unfortunately the biggest industry or the biggest institution down here for capitalism in Champaign-Urbana, which plays a major role in the gentrification, which is displacing black and brown folks. You know, the gentrification actually is touching the Fifth and Hill community, literally right there on University Avenue. And so if we have something to directly go against the university, you know, we have the community come out. If we have the community going against certain issues within their community, we have the student body, the privileged individuals who leave Chicago or leave wherever they come from to come here, you know, and to unfortunately put power into an institution that is further gentrifying the community, that is further, you know, displacing people, that is furthering capitalism, unfortunately. You know, it is up to us to use our privilege to go out into the community. And I believe that that's where CCARC comes in. It's that bridge, right? It's that bridge that can take BSFR to further areas within the community. We met some people in Pasotto. Like, you know, now we know that we can, if need be, we can go out to Pasotto. You know, Champaign County, we're talking about other towns too. So, you know, the organizing is just gonna keep growing. It's gonna keep growing. But the fact that BSFR may not, let's say, have the necessary needs to, let's say, reach Pasotto, we have other people that can, right? And so within these organizing spaces, you see who has resources, or who has, I don't want to say just necessarily resources, who has the talents for this, who has the talents for this, or who has the scope to do this, and who has the scope to do this. And so that's where you see the bridge, where, you know, in organizing spaces, okay, we go like, obviously non-hierarchical truly democratic, which is how BSFR works and that's how CCARC works, it's, who can take on this task? And when CCARC, we've broken it down to the point where it's like, what organization can focus on, let's say within the 10 demands that we have, what can we focus on? For example, one of our demands is bias training for every social service worker, every public worker, right? Obviously, some of the organizations outside of the campus community can implement that, will be better implementing that within, let's say within the councils, within the police. But personally, and I'm sure everyone else will agree, that bias training needs to definitely happen in college, because this is how I knew. So I graduated with a bachelor's in community health. And I was taking a class and we had these little eye clickers. And one of the questions for the eye clickers was, what racial group is more on welfare? I laughed out loud, right? I don't care if anybody noticed. I was like, ha, whatever. Because I said everybody's gonna get this wrong. Post came up, obviously everybody chose Black African American, and then probably 5% chose white. And the professor was like, no, that's wrong. And I laughed out again. And she looked around, but she was like, what's the answer? I said, white. And something as small as that shows that you have people going into healthcare profession. And they have these biases, but they got the good grades. Black people aren't just dying on the streets of police, they're dying in these hospitals because so many people still have this idea that Black women can take pain more than, other people. They don't believe, the pain, the negative health that Black people are having. So we're saying without bias training, yes, at this level, at the governmental level, but let's take a university where you have to pass these bias trainings before you even get your damn degree in healthcare profession, in education. One of the issues I had when I was younger were, having white women as my teachers, and young white women at that. There's a argument that young white women young white women teaching young Black boys. There's always been an issue there. There's always been riotings, research done on that. There's always been research done on why there are not enough Black men in education. So just to speak on that, and so where are they, what's going on? To speak on something, again, to speak to that, white women being my teacher. I was in third grade and I wanted to go to this program. It was a program, to enrich, obviously, it's an enrichment program. So it was like maths, science, language, whatever, language arts, English, at UIC. And, my teacher didn't give me a recommendation. She basically was like, no, you're not gonna get a recommendation, this, that, and the other. So my mother called us like, oh, well, why is, what did he do? I'm not saying change the recommendation, but why is the recommendation like this? Like, what did he do? And my mother was like, did he touch you? Did he hit you? Did he threaten you? And she was like, no, he just doesn't, he doesn't stand in line. He doesn't do this. I'm in third grade. Come on now. Like, right? So just that issue there. And so I wasn't gonna get into the program, but I had to meet with the director, and the director was a Black woman. And I remember clear as day that she said, she was like, why do you feel like they're picking on you? And I remember clear as day, I cried and broke down and said, they're picking on me because I'm Black. And this was one of the times I went to a school that was not predominantly Black. And I said, I think it's because I'm Black. Now I got into the program, obviously, but I'm just saying, just to speak, and maybe it's because I come from an Afrocentric household, where I kind of knew, not to the T that I know now, but to a degree what Blackness means. So, just think about the kids even though I feel like Black kids, unfortunately, they do know, because we see that Black children are out there protesting. They're supposed to be kids. They're supposed to feel safe and protected. But Black children they're forced to grow up so fast. And so speaking from that standpoint, it's what was the bias that she had against Black boys, young Black kids? And what are the biases in education, the biases in healthcare, the biases in these areas? So the point is you got organizations in CCR that can focus on the bias training amongst the government area, but I know as BSFR and got connections with the radical organizations on campus where we can get this bias training on the university's level. And hopefully that can be a blueprint for other universities abroad, obviously because the University of Minnesota has become a blueprint in terms of divesting. You know, there are U of I students who we came up with these demands in terms of U of I divesting from UIPD and from the police itself as well. So the CCR, we're trying to come up with a blueprint. And, you know, this is an experiment, right? The blueprint, you know, what can we be an example of for other communities and other counties, other cities that look like us, right? So I think that's all it comes down to. So for example, like the bias training, what organizations can do certain things, where their expertise. So that was just an example.